I start out by processing some Baltimore red clay that I dug out of our backyard a long time ago and getting that ready to put through a slab roller for these hors d'oeuvre trays. And so I have this small slab roller, which is about 18 inches wide. I extended it by creating some custom made extensions, and it's being rolled out, squeezed out in canvas, and I have different thicknesses of wood that I run through the slab roller in order to stretch and reduce the thickness of the slab. I want this slab to end up being about a quarter of an inch thick, so it fits in the mold, and so you can see the processes. It's really not very hard, and I measure it periodically. I have to add some extra clay to corners to get a nice shaped rectangle, and I continue doing this so that I get a consistent dimension and thickness to my slabs. This is I don't do too much hand building or slab building, but this is an affordable Bailey pottery slab roller that I've made a couple of modifications to, and it's a great tool when I need it. You can see I'm going through some of the final processes. Once it's done, I take it and lay it down on a plywood board, a wear board on plastic, so I can cover it and keep it damp. Then I trim it and I cut it in half because one of these will give me 2 slabs for my tray mold. So here's the tray mold. I sprinkle a little bit of white clay in the bottom, hopefully so that ends up being in the back a little bit like a starry night constellation. And you can see that I kind of work this in the mold. I take a wire tool and trim off the excess, use a knife to detail it out, and then I put it over on my banding wheel and take some clay slip, which is basically the consistency of probably mayonnaise or heavy cream, and that's simply the same clay that I'm using that's mixed with water, and I smooth that down, and that's dried. Now I'm going to take this off. I'm going to pop it out of the mold. See how I do that? And I'm going to make another one. The one that came off the mold is drying in the back. I'm going through the same process, trimming it off with a little piece of wire, putting it back on the banding wheel, and so on and so forth. So each one of these is completely handmade. There's going to be small anomalies because of being handmade. So there are some dried pieces, still damp. I flip them over with newspaper and basically white cardboard. I take them back over to my banding wheel, and I want to clean that edge up. I take that same clay slip with a sponge, kind of a fine sponge, a potter's sponge, and go over the edge. Here I do it a second time. I usually work on these in series, 2 or 4 at a time, sometimes 6. And then I put them back in the mold and take this custom stamp, a brass stamp that I had made, which has their initials and date stamped into it. I press that in the mold, and then I take my other personal pottery stamp and initial it on the bottom, and then set that aside and repeat the process. And you can see, press that in. You can't press it too hard, you can't press it too gentle. There's my personal stamp, my initials, and we go on to another process. These have now come out of the bisque firing, the first firing, and I'm going to be painting a white underglaze, a white ceramic underglaze into their signature initials and date. So this white underglaze, when it gets fired, it's permanent. These are ceramic. All of this stuff is ceramic materials. It all has to be fired in the kiln. So I paint one layer on a series of these, and then I go back and I paint a second layer, and then I have to take a double-edged sponge and then wipe them off so that the excess is removed and the only thing you see is their signature initials and date. Then I put some little pieces of paper over the white stamp, and then now I'm glazing them. I'm using my mist glaze, which is kind of my standard general utility glaze that I use for a lot of things, and I'm pouring them. I'm only glazing the top portion. There's going to always be a little bit of runoff on the sides. I'm not glazing the bottom because I already put that white clay in the mold, so the bottoms are going to have that, hopefully, kind of a constellation, starry night look. Once they're glazed, I peel off the paper over their initials with a X-Acto knife. And get them ready for the final kind of artistic decorating process. And so I'm going to start this out by using my sky blue glaze. And I'm going to be using a Japanese brush and painting this glaze on very kind of spontaneous and casual across the center to add a little bit of interest, little bit of dimension and depth to the tray. And I do that for every single one. And after this, I'm going to take my my special dark red detail glaze, which has high concentration of iron and rutile in it, and I'm using a ear syringe, a baby's ear syringe, and I'm using that to kind of gesturally suggest a little bit of a mountainous, landscapey kind of a motif. because they're getting married and they live in Colorado. So there you go. Now we're gonna. You can see the back. It's gonna totally change when it gets fired. But we're gonna load these in the kiln. I can fit about 28 in each firing. This is an electric kiln. There's a couple of shots in my studio. I can fit 4 to a shelf. 7 shelves equals 28, and those little round cups are test glazes. I always try to do some testing each time I fire. So now the kiln's coming out. Everything's being unloaded. I'm checking out my little test cups, and then I'm taking out the trays. This kiln, as most of them are for me at this stage in my career, is 100%. So these are hors d'oeuvre trays for my son and future daughter-in-law who are getting married in Colorado at the beginning of June. I'm so happy that you have taken the time to watch this.